Imarn Ayton has become one of the leaders of the anti-racism protests in Britain.
I don't want us to just be marching on the roads and screaming Black Lives Matter. We need to be productive in the things that we're saying because we now have a voice.
For weeks, regular Black Lives Matter protests have been taking place in London and all over the country. Imarn Ayton joined the protests a few weeks ago. She hopes that this grassroots movement will culminate in concrete political reforms.
No justice, no peace.
Though slogans are important,
No justice, no
Imarn
peace.
Ayton wants more.
Black Lives Matter.
She is an actor by profession, but the Black Lives Matter protests in the US moved her, and now she's become one of the leading figures of Britain's anti-racism movement.
Must go. The biggest thing for me as an organiser is to ensure that everyone understands and expresses the same narrative, that we're all unified in the same narrative. I don't actually know my speech. I tend to speak from the heart. I have a rough idea, and then I tend to just go with passion.
Maybe we can put it here?
Yeah, see if you can help get someone.
Like most of the protests, this demo in London's Hyde Park was organised pretty much at the last minute. Imarn Ayton only met her co-speakers recently.
Like long, like, yeah, straight. Beautiful, gorgeous. Right, so who's first? So I'm first, you're second, Black Unity. Then we've got Lindsay. After Phoenix is Jada, and then after Jada is Ellen. Start within about half an hour, just wait for more numbers, and we're waiting for a second crowd of people that are supposed to be coming.
It's important that the demos draw big numbers to make sure that the message gets across, and the movement becomes a catalyst for change.
We are all here today because we know, every one of us knows, it is time to burn down institutional racism. That is why we are here. We have marched because we are tired. We have marched because we are angry. And we march because we need change, yeah?
And change means fundamental change, in schools, in the workplace, and in the judicial system. Not everyone here thinks that such change is necessary. David Curtin, whose father is Jamaican, sits as a Brexit Alliance member on the London Assembly. He's come as an observer.
I don't agree with the narrative that Britain is a systemically racist country. This is one of the best countries in the world to be a black person, to be an ethnic minority, a person of colour. There's equal opportunities for everyone, there's equality under the law, there's freedom and liberty. So I think that this is a narrative that's being talked up and is actually creating division.
But it's about everybody learning to work together.
People in the organisation of Black Lives Matter are pushing for a cultural change and a cultural shift. But, you know, this country has a large silent majority which is conservative and loves our history and our heritage and our culture and doesn't want it to change. There is a huge amount of resistance to this movement that you're seeing. It's very, very loud, but it doesn't have the support of the majority of the people.
But Imarn Ayton and other anti-racism campaigners point out that racism is subtle and structural in Britain. They say that it starts at school, where pupils are taught about the British Empire in glorified terms. When people of colour crop up, they are invariably slaves. They say that statues of colonialists and slave traders have to be contextualised, and history has to be taught in a different way.
Education is a big one. I mean, we're trying to let the UK learn about its own history and actually, you know, have some black history in the curriculum. So
systemic racism is so underlying in the roots. This country is designed to benefit middle class, straight, white men. Everyone else is fighting 10 times harder the fight that they should fight. And it's unfair that because of my skin colour or anyone else's skin colour, sexuality, we are looked down upon.
We're stereotyped a lot as being poor, we're stereotyped as being thugs, we're stereotyped as being ghetto, and we're here to break that stereotype. We can articulate ourselves the same way all these other people can come and articulate themselves. We're here to talk what we have to say, and we're going to do it without anyone else speaking for us.
Imarn Ayton, who grew up in the culturally mixed area of Peckham in South London, says that she has often experienced racism, at times overtly, sometimes covertly.
It's something that, for myself personally, I've gotten used to. Whether it is someone going out of their way to stand nowhere near you, whether it's the odd look when you walk into a shop. Yeah, there's a lot of micro behaviours that go on.
She's also gotten used to hearing insults all her life.
I've been called the N-word before. I've been more covert, you're attractive for a black woman. You get a mixture of those types of things. I know, that one really burns us as young black women. That statement has been said many years growing up.
So now she's putting all her energies into ensuring that she and nobody else ever has to hear racist slurs again. Finding a quiet moment for herself isn't easy.
It's very difficult, especially as I am very new to all of this. I was not someone that was protesting or organising protests before the 31st of May. So for me, just being an average girl from Peckham who has experienced racism, who is passionate about institutionalised racism and is confident about vocalising it, for me, it's been very difficult to now stand by myself in this reformist agenda and have to try to unite others that disagree with my agenda.
And again, with this foot becoming slightly more side on to me. And moving this that way.
What's also new is that she's much more in the spotlight. But thanks to her media presence, she can get her ideas out there. As opposed to some activists, Imarn Ayton is not calling for radical reforms such as abolishing the police. She wants reforms that the majority of Britons can get behind. And she wants to educate.
So the BLM movement is a global movement. I am very much focused on putting a spotlight on institutionalised racism. That is my main focus.
She says that only when this is accepted as a fact will the racist slurs finally come to an end.
For me, it's really important that society acknowledges the fact that we have a problem with institutionalised racism, and it's only then can we rectify this problem. Only then can we find the long-lasting solutions that we're all so desperate for.
Change won't come. Oh, yes, it will. See, I go to the movies, and I go break some time. So to me, don't have my.
She hopes that the anti-racism movement will create more respect for people of colour in Britain. And Imarn thinks this is the right moment. She says it's imperative not to miss this chance.
We can no longer lead with anger. We must be strategic. We must be intelligent. We must use our wisdom, and we must fight for the things that are actually going to be implemented in law. Thank you, because there's a lot of talk consistently, which is fine, but it has to amount to action.
Imarn is organising a new protest with the musician Phoenix. They want to draw up a list of political demands and consider themselves representatives of the anti-racism movement in Britain.
People that were enslaved.
I think we both have a very kind of clear vision for what we think needs to happen for this protest. I think we both spoke and felt frustrated that there wasn't enough demands being made, that our voice wasn't being heard loudly enough. So at the end of the day, none of the civil rights movements we ever had wouldn't have gotten anywhere without leaders and without people kind of stepping up to the plate and speaking for the rest of us.
One concrete demand that they have is quotas to ensure that people of colour and other minorities in Britain can access top positions in society.
Every 5 years they have a quota that they have to meet to ensure, one, that we can safely say there's no longer institutionalised racism within that industry, and two, it also gives confidence to those of the younger generation to branch into those industries because they are being represented and there are leaders that are black.
David Kirtle is totally against such quotas, which he thinks are superfluous. He is more in favour of law and order for resolving society's problems. He is also proud of Britain's history and does not think that this statue of Winston Churchill should be banished to the museum.
Yeah, well, he wasn't a perfect man. Of course, it was a long time ago. People had a different frame of reference for that. He was wrong on some little things, but on the big thing that really mattered, he got that right. And he helped this country defeat Nazism, not just for here, but for all of Europe. He got that right, and he should be maintained in pride of place here.
Black Lives Matter!
Imarn Ayton agrees that there is no point in simply toppling or defacing statues, as has happened over recent weeks. She wants to raise awareness in a more systematic way. She seems to have struck the right tone with her fellow protesters.
I think she's powerful, I think she's strong, and I think she's doing an amazing job and has been for the past month.
I think she's brave. I think she's a great example that we can be whatever we want to be, and we can embrace our names, and we can embrace our culture and everything else that we bring to the table.
She is an amazing, incredible, inspirational woman. She has done so much to organise this, other protests as well. She talks to anyone. She's such a community-spirited person, and honestly, like, she deserves an award realistically for what she's doing today, and she's brought everyone together.
And the movement seems to have had an effect politically. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced a government commission to look into racial inequalities. But Imarn Ayton thinks it's going to be a long haul.
It's a big task, a big picture that we're trying to achieve, but hopefully with this momentum there's no reason why we can't achieve that.
And she doesn't intend to stop until these ambitious goals have been achieved.
We fight for our black men. I want to hear you say it. We fight for our black men.